Tension has risen because of the Gulf War. Medicines from fever to cancer are going to become more expensive. It is night. At a medical store in a small town, a man has come to buy medicine for his mother. The shopkeeper is making the bill on the computer, but there is a slight worry on his face. He says, "There is stock right now, but I don't know what the rate will be next week." It sounds like a simple conversation, but in reality, this is the beginning of a much bigger story. The fear is that if tensions in West Asia drag on for long, then many medicines used for fever, infection, cancer, and even in ICUs may not only become more expensive, but may also fall short for some time. The curiosity is this: how has a conflict happening thousands of kilometers away reached India's medical bill? And that is the most dangerous part of this story. It is no longer just a matter of oil, it has become a matter of the entire medicine factory line. The news being discussed the most right now is that the government of India is considering allowing a temporary increase of 10 to 20% in the prices of essential medicines. According to a money control report, this proposal has come up because input costs for pharma companies have risen sharply due to Gulf supply disruptions, and the government is considering limited, calibrated relief in order to maintain supply. The report also says that this would not be a permanent increase, but a temporary arrangement of around 3 months. In other words, the government's intention is not to make medicines expensive for the long term, but to prevent the supply chain from breaking. Now, the most important question arises here. Why have medicine prices become linked to the Gulf crisis? The answer is solvents and petrochemical-linked inputs. In pharma manufacturing, many organic solvents are used during the preparation of drug substances, excipients, and drug products. The International Council for Harmonization, or 𝐮𝐸𝐥𝐥𝐸, clearly states in its residual solvents guideline that these are volatile chemicals used or produced during the manufacturing process, and even after practical techniques, some trace levels can remain. In simple language, these chemicals play a critical role in dissolving, purifying, processing, and isolating many medicines. They are not the active medicine in the final tablet or injection, but without them the manufacturing chain can get stuck. The tensions in West Asia are shaking this chain because energy, petrochemicals, shipping routes, and freight costs are all linked to one another. Reuters wrote in its report of the 16th of April 2026 that because of Middle East supply disruptions and the Iran conflict, India is also concerned about sulfur supplies, especially because of the impact on the Strait of Hormuz route. Another Reuters report and Economic Times coverage show that the West Asia crisis has directly pressured logistics, shipping routes, transit hubs, and freight costs, and this has also affected Indian pharma exports. When shipping becomes expensive, petrochemical inputs become scarce, and transit becomes uncertain, the total cost of making medicine goes up. That is why industry bodies like IPA and OPPI have raised concerns before the government. According to the Money Control report, drug makers say that costs have risen so much that fully absorbing them has now become difficult. Some industry players demanded up to a 50% price increase, but the government is reportedly not in favor of going beyond a calibrated band of 10 to 20%. This means a middle path is being searched for between industry demand and consumer protection. The government wants companies not to stop production, but it also does not want patients to bear the burden of uncontrolled inflation. The most human part of this whole story begins here. Words like solvents, petrochemicals, or input cost feel like distant things to ordinary people. But when those same input costs reach injectable antibiotics, cancer therapy support drugs, IV products, sterile formulations, or even everyday antibiotics, their impact shows directly in the patient's pocket. For a family already burdened by treatment, tests, doctor's fees, and travel costs, even a 10 to 20% jump is not small, especially for households where there is chronic illness or long-duration therapy going on. That is why this topic moves beyond economics and becomes a matter of social stress. One more technical thing needs to be understood here. Many people may think that if the solvent is not part of the final medicine, then how can a shortage affect the medicine so much? In reality, the manufacturing process works like a chain. The 𝐮𝐸𝐥𝐥𝐸 guideline clearly states that solvent selection can affect things like yield, purity, solubility, and crystal form. In other words, solvent is not just an assisting chemical, but a part of the production outcome. If the right solvent does not arrive on time or becomes too expensive, the process can slow down, batch costs can rise, quality management can become complicated, and the viability of some products can itself get affected. And the problem is not limited only to solvents. The West Asia conflict is also affecting the broader chemical and logistics ecosystem. Economic Times reported on the 17th of April 2026 that India's pharma exports fell by 23.17% in March 2nd, 2026, which was the biggest monthly fall in at least 5 years, and logistics disruption and freight escalation linked to the West Asia crisis was said to be important reasons behind it. If exports are being affected this much, then the presence of domestic cost pressure also does not seem impossible. In other words, the disturbance that is first appearing in foreign trade may later also reflect in domestic supply pricing. The government also has legal space to intervene in medicine prices in such extraordinary situations. Under Para 19 of the Drugs Prices Control Order 2013,
The government can fix the ceiling price or retail price in extraordinary circumstances and in public interest. This provision has also been used earlier in exceptional cases. In March 2nd 02 PIB also made it clear that under Para 19 of DPCO 2013, NPPA can intervene in pricing in extraordinary circumstances in the public interest. This means that if the government makes a temporary price revision, there is a legal mechanism available for it. But this also creates a new complication. Suppose companies manufacture medicines on expensive inputs and the government allows rates to be raised for 3 months. After that, if the global situation becomes normal, freight comes down, and solvent availability improves, then what will happen to the expensive stock? Will it be sold at the older higher rate? Will later batches come at a cheaper rate? This is exactly the kind of operational confusion on which policymakers will have to decide very carefully. Because pharma pricing is not just a matter of the factory gate. Wholesaler, distributor, retailer, and patient. All are part of this chain. Here, the industry's argument also needs to be understood. Pharma companies are saying that this is not a pure profit-seeking move, but a matter of survival and supply continuity. When raw material cost rises, energy cost rises, freight rises, insurance cost rises, and regulatory price caps are already tight, then some essential products can become economically unviable. This is what came out in the money control report too, that companies are saying that if relief is not given, then production of some essential medicines may become a loss-making deal. In other words, the fear is not only of expensive medicine, but also of less available medicine. And many times, shortage becomes a bigger crisis than a price increase. On the other side, consumer concern is also absolutely valid. If a temporary increase is implemented, its effect can show directly at retail chemist shops. Especially in medicines that are under the price control regime and are bought regularly by patients, the psychological impact of a rate revision is also large. People begin to panic and stock medicines, chemists become cautious about future supply, and the risk of grey market behavior also increases. That is why messaging will be just as important for the government as pricing policy. The public will have to be reassured that this is not a panic moment, but a temporary supply balancing step. One big question is also this. Is this just the effect of the Gulf War, or is it also exposing a deeper dependency of Indian pharma? The truth is that geopolitics often brings out those weaknesses that remain hidden on normal days. If a pharma powerhouse like India can be affected to this extent by pressure related to solvents, petrochemicals, shipping lanes, and imported intermediates, then it means more work still remains to be done on supply chain resilience. Words like diversified sourcing, strategic reserves, alternate chemical routes, and domestic capacity building are no longer just topics for industry conferences. They are becoming requirements of public health security. That is why this news should not be seen only as a simple headline saying medicines will become expensive. It is actually a connected story of global conflict, shipping vulnerability, petrochemical dependency, price control policy, and patient affordability. The reason there is discussion about everything from fever tablets to cancer treatment support drugs is that the pharma production line is an interconnected system. If one part of that system, such as solvents, shakes, the effect can spread across many therapeutic categories. Not every medicine will be affected in exactly the same way, but the danger of broad cost pressure can definitely arise. And now the most important point. What has come out so far is still in the stage of consideration and proposal, not final notification. The money control report clearly says that internal consultations are going on and a formal notification may come later. So at this stage, it would be wrong to say that all the new prices have already been implemented. The correct thing to say right now is that the government is considering a temporary 10 to 20% increase. The industry is putting pressure. The legal route exists, and the West Asia crisis has created real cost stress. In other words, the warning bell has rung, but the final decision is still pending. Perhaps the biggest lesson of this whole story is that war does not always stop at the border. Sometimes it appears in the fuel bill, sometimes in freight charges, sometimes in fertilizer prices, and sometimes in that slip at the medical store which a family holds with trembling hands. If you connect the pressure Reuters showed on fertilizer and sulfur supply, the decline economic times recorded in pharma exports, and the government's deliberation on essential medicines pricing reported by Money Control, the picture becomes clear. The Gulf crisis has now reached the doorstep of India's pharma ecosystem. So now the question is not just whether medicine will become expensive or not. The real question is whether India will be able to handle this crisis through temporary price relief, smart policy, and stable supply chain management, or whether in the coming weeks patients will have to face both bill shock first and stock shock after that. That is the suspense of this story. Because until the official notification arrives, uncertainty will remain. And there is perhaps nothing in the market more expensive than uncertainty.
If this video has taught you something new, or if you feel this information should reach more people, don't forget to like and share the video. Your small share can become valuable and useful information for someone else. If you have any questions related to this topic, or if you would like to share your opinion with us, be sure to write in the comment box. We read every question and suggestion from you, because your feedback inspires us to create better content. And if you want to keep receiving such interesting and reliable information about business, the economy, and the world in the future, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel GRT Business and also press the bell icon so that you get notifications of every new video directly. At GRT Business, we always strive to provide you with accurate, balanced, and reliable information. Our news and analysis are prepared based on information obtained from various news agencies, public sources, and public opinion. We make every effort to verify and validate each fact as much as possible, but in case of any possible error or dispute, the responsibility lies with the respective sources. Our only aim is to present you with a correct and trustworthy perspective so that you can understand any topic better.